The College Football Playoff Committee drops the Georgia Bulldogs from number 1 to number 6 on Selection Sunday. Georgia is officially out of college football playoff contention. It is over. The three-peat it's over. There's no other way to put it. Georgia loses to Alabama in the SEC Championship 27-24. Comeback bid falls just short. The final college football playoff rankings go as follows. Michigan 1, Washington 2, Texas 3, and Alabama 4. So they shot Texas up all the way to 3, Alabama up all the way to 4. They took number 7. It's crazy, all of the unprecedented things that happen in this college football playoff. And this video might be a little jumbled around, but let's just talk about what's happened this past weekend. And this whole year of college football has led to this day, to picking these 4 teams. I think that I'm not mad at the committee for what they did. I'm not mad at the committee for what they did. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that they left Florida State out. And I don't think that Florida State was one of the 4 best teams in college football. One of my concerns is that the committee was going to put in the Seminoles and they would just get boat raced in a semifinal game because they're just not as good as the other teams. Can a blowout still happen in a semifinal game? Yes, it's possible, but I do think that, as we've said, this is a more justifiable 4 in my opinion, and I get the justification with Florida State. But something that happened that was unprecedented is number 1 in the rankings going into it and going into this weekend has never dropped out of the playoff before, and they not only drop out of the playoff to 5, they drop them all the way down to 6 behind Florida State. I don't agree with Georgia being behind Florida State. I would have been less shocked if Georgia was number 5. Georgia is not the 6th best team in the country. I'm going to do this. Let's get this out of the way first. Georgia's one of the 4 best teams in the country. You want it to be the best 4? Look at the resume. Break it down. Look at who they beat and look at who they lost to. They lost to 3 in the 4th quarter to Alabama in the SEC championship game. After destroying the SEC, destroying their schedule for the most part. Was it the strongest strength of schedule? No, but the last 2 months of it were really, really tough, and Georgia passed it with flying colors and had the number 1 designation going into this final weekend. Georgia looked... it's interesting to me how all of the national media people kind of switch up. And a week ago, or not even a week ago, on Tuesday, when the most recent rankings came out, all of them said, "Oh well, Georgia's one heading against. It looks like Georgia's already in. No matter what happens against Alabama, it looks like Georgia's already in." And then when they did lose to Alabama, none of them said that. None of them said that. And it's not like Alabama just went in there and crushed Georgia. Alabama barely beat Georgia. That was a very, very competitive football game. There aren't many environments like the SEC Championship. There aren't many environments like an SEC Championship where Georgia and Alabama are playing. You can feel in that stadium every wave of emotion, every ounce of stress, all of that energy. It moves through your body. I have had trouble sleeping. I look like crap. It's because I didn't sleep that much, and I got to get up and I gotta do this stuff. But to me, the committee doesn't have it right, leaving Georgia out. If we're talking about the 4 best teams solely, Ryan Curley from Dawg post here. I'm linking a newsletter down below. You want to be a 5-star Georgia fan? You sign up for the newsletter and you get all those stories in your inbox every single day. I think I've got the TV on going. If I look in this direction, I'm looking at my TV. They got Steve Sarkisian on there talking. I don't know what he's saying right now, but when you stack up Alabama and Texas's resume, or Texas and Georgia's resume, I mean, they're not the same teams as they were in September. The head-to-heads matter, and the fact that Texas went into Tuscaloosa and won matters. But when you stack them up against Georgia, Georgia's loss is to Bama by 3. Texas's loss is to an Oklahoma team that's not good. It's not that good. An Oklahoma team that struggled with a lot of bad teams. Guess who else struggled with a lot of bad teams? Texas. So if you want to have that, we can do the individual one-on-one argument where, this is why I think Georgia's better than this team or whichever it is. But there's a total argument for Georgia over Texas. Georgia just lost the wrong game, guys. Georgia lost the wrong game. They lost on conference championship weekend. These conference championships have been, and it's going to change. Everything's going to change next year, and this is the last year that this happened. And hey, look, I've liked the 14 playoff for the most part, just because I don't think the playoff needs to be that big. I think 12 is a little too much. I think 8's probably better. when it comes to college football. I do think that there ends up being a talent separation. You don't need too many teams in there. But this was a year where a 12-team playoff would have benefited Georgia and given them a chance. And that's not the case. And they have to deal with what the rules are, and they get left out. It wasn't in Georgia's control. What was in their control was winning this game, and they lost. If you want to be honest with yourself, Georgia lost this game and ultimately lost its playoff chance when it lost to Alabama. It was a playoff game. It was a de facto quarterfinal game for this college football playoff, essentially, and that was the same case in the Pac-12 championship on Friday night between Washington and Oregon. But you had to have Alabama. My biggest concern really was the SEC was going to get left out for Florida State. And you had to have Alabama in there. They just beat Georgia. I would have gone to bat for Alabama on here, to be honest. I know that most of the people watching this are probably just hate Alabama and all that. I get it. I understand. Don't think that I don't understand all that. But I would have went to bat for Alabama on here if the committee decided it was going to put in Florida State at 4 instead of Alabama Crimson Tide. I really had no idea what the committee was going to do, but the closer and closer we got to it, I kind of thought, you know what? They're gonna put Texas in there. They're gonna honor that head-to-head between Texas and Alabama in September. I do think teams change. That is part of why Alabama is in the playoff, because they elevated as the season went on, got better, and they end up with the best win heading into the college football playoff over number 1 Georgia. Dropping Georgia to 6 is ridiculous, however. I don't have Vegas odds in front of me right now, but Georgia, I believe, would be favored over Texas, would be favored over Washington for sure. So we're talking about Georgia definitely being favored over 2 of the top 4 teams. I think Georgia would maybe be favored over Alabama in a rematch. I actually would be pretty confident they would. And I think it'd be a really close between Alabama and Texas, or between Michigan. I'm getting blown up and that's distracting me. Between Michigan and Georgia, I think that line would be pretty similar. So I think I had to respond to that. I apologize. I think that line would be really close. Like, I think it would maybe be a coin flip between Michigan and Georgia. To me, I do think Georgia is a better team. That's the thing. I think Georgia's better than. I think Georgia's probably the second or third best team in the country now. Can you say? I thought Georgia had a better team than Alabama. I thought Nick Saban outcoached Kirby Smart. I think it had a lot to do with that. I do think this Georgia team is still probably the most talented team in the country. It's definitely one of the 4 best. I don't want to just bang on that drum over and over again. What does this mean? I think it means an Orange Bowl. That part has not been announced yet as I'm doing this. So I think it means an Orange Bowl, and against Florida State is probably the consolation prize for this three-peat. And, let's do this part. You want to talk Georgia fans off a ledge? It's incredible. It's an incredible time that Georgia football is in right now, competing the way it is under Kirby Smart. And Georgia's going to be in the playoff. Georgia's going to make these 12-team playoffs. It's going to have chances to win national championships probably year in and year out. And I think that back-to-back championships is definitely a sweet thing, and not a lot of people get to do. So for Georgia fans, maybe this won't sting as much as it should, but losing out on the three-peat, I understand. That's that it doesn't happen. And Georgia had a chance to make history this year, and yesterday that went away when it lost to Alabama. I think Kirby Smart had a chance to really cement that Georgia is number 1, that Kirby is number 1 right now, everything. And it's not as clear with that. I do still believe Georgia probably is the best program. They just have the second best coach. And that's probably what it is. And you flip them. I think right now Alabama has the second best program with the best coach. So I think that's kind of the situation between Alabama and Georgia right now. And maybe that's part of what's what's getting Alabama these heads-to-heads. I should have muted something. I've been getting texts this whole time. This is an unorganized video, as you can tell. This is just my instant reaction to the college football playoff rankings. So my thoughts are not all 100% there. Real quick, what I think about the actual playoffs. You had to put Michigan in there as the 13-0 Big Ten championship. You had to put Texas in there, I guess. But the thing about that is I don't think all conference championships are created equal. The SEC championship is harder to win than the Big 12 championship. And, Texas does enough beating Oklahoma State. But if you look at, really look at these things, Georgia had a tougher time than Texas going through this. when you talk about the Big 12. And Texas really struggled with some teams like Wyoming, like TCU, some really, really bad teams that Texas arguably should have lost to. Georgia, the only real had to pull itself out of a real situation was in Auburn in September. So it's been a long time since Georgia's been in a tough situation like that. That case, it seems like, got thrown out the window with Georgia as well. But the part that I really don't understand is the media people switching up with their thought process so much after. It's not like Georgia got destroyed by Alabama. I mean, that was a close competitive football. We're talking about a 3-point football game where Georgia almost, came back and had chances, was maybe going to have a chance to win. So it was a really, really competitive SEC championship, and dropping Georgia behind Florida, that's the other part of this. I mean, I feel like I'm getting to a new piece of it, and that's why this video keeps going on. Georgia's better than Florida State, and they have Florida State ranked over Georgia. I mean, I understand Florida State, wins its conference championship, but not all conference championships are created equal. The ACC championship is not as hard to win as the SEC championship. It's not as hard to win games throughout the year in the ACC as it is in the SEC. Florida State, with their obviously the backup quarterbacks in there, the third-string quarterbacks in there, and that's part of why they're not playing as well. But they weren't playing well anyway, all year long. All year long. The OSU win is overrated. Their best wins are Miami? And you have them ranked over Georgia? There's my rant.